Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Varsana Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Antakoti Vaishnava Linda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Shri Gaur Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Gita Govardhana ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Navadvip Dham ki jai. Gangamaya ki jai. Jamunamaya ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Vrindavan Chandra ki jai. Shri Shri Radhika Raman ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaura Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guru.
Guru Guranga Namo Shri
In the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna perfectly contradicts himself right in the middle of one verse. Contradictions in scripture are invitations to go deeper. Krishna says that I'm impartial to all souls. I hate no one, and I favor no one. Now the contradiction. However, those who worship me in devotion are in me, and I am in them. Previously, Lord Krishna has already explained the three aspects of himself, revealed as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And here, in the first half of the verse, we hear the Paramatma feature of Krishna speaking as the impartial witness and observer of everyone and everything, which is one step, I wouldn't say higher, but different than Brahman, who seems to be perfectly unconcerned about anything and anyone. Paramatma is impartial. Second half of the verse, where he says that those who worship me are in me and I am in them, indicates supreme partiality, which on the part of Paramatma would be a blemish, whereas for Bhagavan is an ornament that enriches the devotee's love. And it is that partiality which inspires the Leela, which governs the land of love, Vrindavan, where there is the supreme oneness, not as the kind of merging with the Brahmajyoti, but the oneness of love. And we find that some souls are reluctant to surrender in love, because then you're subject to be controlled by love, which may seem like you're losing your independence, whereas actually the opposite is true. The supreme independence is found in being conquered by love. So we see in the development of the battle of Kurukshetra that Krishna favored the Pandavas and Kunti. Although he made every effort to unite the Kauravas with the Pandavas. And Krishna himself went as an emissary for peace as a last resort to avoid the impending battle. And there's one thing that you could say Krishna cannot do, although he could do it, but he won't do it, and that is to interfere with our independence. He made every rational, philosophical, moral plea, and Dhritarashtra was actually very moved. And Krishna was repeating what the Pandavas had already sent to Dhritarashtra in the form of a letter, that we have completed our part of the exile. That period is over. And if you could just return to us a small portion of the kingdom, then we can live all in peace, and Dhritarashtra will be more glorious for having a united kingdom under his reign. And Dhritarashtra was favorable. Duryodhana was not. And even as word approached that Krishna had already left Hastinapur, Garuda had landed on his flagstaff, and he was approaching. Duryodhana was still scheming. He told Dhritarashtra, just make him a prisoner. Just arrest him and imprison him when he arrives. And Dhritarashtra, you fool. So Krishna did not succeed in averting the battle, and it thereafter waged for 18 days, leaving so much havoc, sorrow, and grief in its wake. And what's really interesting is that Arjuna's arguments, right at the beginning of the battle, telling Krishna why he refused to fight, one major reasoning is that so many soldiers will perish, which means that so many Matajis will be unprotected. And then there will be low-class progeny, and culture will decline. And actually, that happened to a large degree. So, Arjuna's arguments were very appropriate. And we see in what followed the answer to this deviant philosophy circling these days, that whatever happens, it means that Krishna wanted it. Well, obviously, Krishna did not want the battle of Kurukshetra because he made every arrangement to avert it. Do you think that Krishna wanted the Holocaust? Did Krishna want child abuse? If he did, then we're worshiping the wrong Lord. What is the evidence that Shukadeva Goswami uses to fortify his case that we cannot worship anyone but Krishna? The case was Putana, who was addicted to living on the blood of babies. And she approached Krishna with that intent. Now, little history gives context here. Putana was previously the sister, some say the daughter, of Bali Maharaj. And when he surrendered everything to Krishna, and Krishna took everything from him, when Bali Maharaj's, whether sister or daughter, first saw Vamanadev, she was enchanted. And her maternal affection was so activated that she felt a longing to have such a child as Vamana, as her own. But then when she saw him expand in size and reveal that he's actually Vishnu, her dormant envy was awakened. Not awakened, aggravated. And in her next birth as Putana, she had the opportunity to exercise that envy in her attempt to kill Krishna. Was he impartial? No, he was partial, because all he could see is that she's approaching me as a mother. And he accepted her as a mother. And after extracting all the poison in her heart, leaving nothing but unfound new love, she was promoted to an assistant to Mother Yashoda as a nursemaid to Krishna. At the conclusion of which pastime Shukadeva Goswami very emotionally proclaims, "How could I worship anyone other than Krishna?" Who to this evil Rakshashi, approaching him with all ill intention, he found some good. And he brought that to the forefront and eliminated everything else and promoted her to this most honorable position as the mother of Krishna. So did Krishna want? What is that new philosophy? Krishna must have wanted it. Whatever goes wrong, or whatever stupid thing I did, Krishna must have wanted it. Well, who said that? There's a difference between what Krishna allows and what Krishna wants, although in the long run, these two are aligned, however millions of births that may take. Krishna allows what he hates to achieve what he loves, which you see in the story of Putana. He loves his mothers like the cows who daily give their milk to Krishna. He awarded to Putana a position like one of Krishna's cows, or Krishna's own mother. And that illustrates what a sacred concept motherhood is. And we see that reach its pinnacle in Chaitanya Lila. Lord Chaitanya himself being what Kaviraj Goswami or Vrindavan Das Thakur, Kaviraj Goswami, I believe, describes Lord Gauranga as the best devotees of mothers. And when the the news became public, that because of that criticism, Lord Gauranga was going to take sannyas and leave Navadvip. And the devotees were devastated. Their suffering was intolerable. But no one felt the suffering that Mother Sachi did. So after consoling the other devotees by his loving embrace, Lord Chaitanya returned home where Mother Sachi was unconscious, overwhelmed with unbearable grief. She was pale, she was thin like skin and bones. And she told her son, Lord Gauranga, that I cannot live if you live. And he consoled her, saying, please don't think like this, that I'm leaving. Because we can never be separated for even so much as a moment. I will always be your son, birth after birth after birth. And in this life, I'm your son in several different ways. I'm your Nimai. I'm also the joy of Sankirtan. That's another avatar of myself. Or really, he said, the joy of Sankirtan is born from you, Mother Sachi, as is the bliss of deity worship. And he embraced her, and all her anguish was relieved. Still, she tried to plead with him to stay home. She said, here in Navadvip, you have a host of followers like Advaita and Srivas. You have a host of friends like Gadadhar Pandit. You and they have assembled here on earth to teach and demonstrate the eternal dharma of the soul. And what kind of religious principle would allow one to kill his mother? Which is what will happen if you leave home, leave Navadvip. I lost my husband in your childhood. Jagannath Mishra went back to Vaikuntha. I lost your brother when he took sannyas. And if I lose you, I will have to forfeit my life. It is only because of your presence that my home, without any lamps, is luminous and bright. My life is sustained by your words, which are like nectar. And Mother Sachi entered in the mood of Kaushalya, pleading with Ram not to accept the exile and leave home. And then Nimai informed her that Mother Sachi You are forever my mother. When I was Prishnigarbha, you were my mother, Prishni. When I was Vamana, you were my mother, Aditi. When you were Devahuti, I took birth as your son, Kapila. As Kushalya, I became your Ram, and as Devaki, I became your son, Krishna. But you are unique, because to you, I take birth in 2 additional forms. You are the mother of the devotees' voices, which give birth to the joy of Nam Sankirtan. And you are the earth goddess, who gives birth to my deity form. For impersonalists, it's difficult to understand how Krishna and his devotees, though divine, reveal a human side. How else could we develop love for Krishna? And we saw that consistently in Srila Prabhupada. It's completely transcendental in all cases, while simultaneously being very aware of the human condition and reciprocating in such a perfect way as to steal our hearts. And after the Battle of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhisthira was overwhelmed with grief and despair. Despite innumerable instructions from Srila Vyasadeva and even Krishna himself. Overwhelmed with the guilt that he had been the cause of the death of 540,000 men. And he put that in context. And most of those men had wives and sisters, and they all had mothers. So, I will be the cause of grief for so many mothers. He's including daughters and sisters who are little mothers. And one of the main causes of his grief and despondency was that being the cause of the Battle of Kurukshetra, in the sense that it was waged to install him as the emperor, which would create so much enmity in the hearts of so many Matajis. And he said, that depth of sin cannot be relieved even by millions and millions of births in hell. So then Krishna led the Pandavas to Bhishma's bed of arrows. And seeing them, he became overwhelmed with grief. He said, "Oh, what injustices you had to undergo." Speaking to the Pandavas, what kind of injustices you all had to undergo along with your mother, Kunti. Even though you were Dharmaraj, accompanied by the mighty Bhima and the expertise of Arjuna and the loyalty of Nakul and Sahadev. It was because Krishna wanted to expand the glory of Bhishma that no one else was able to relieve his anguish. Where was Bhishma? Where did he reside? Where was his home? His home is named after his father, his guru, Janu Muni, Janudvip, the island in Navadvip Dham that personifies the principle of Vadanam, prayer, and nourishes that principle. He was a resident of Janudvip, born of Mother Ganges, whose father was Santanu Maharaj. Janu Muni, the guru of Bhishma, resided on the island of Janudvip, within the lotus of Navadvip Dham. And Janu Muni attained the darshan of Krishna, who revealed his upcoming future as Lord Gauranga, creating such ecstasy in Janu Muni that he entered samadhi after praying that birth after birth he could be born in Navadvip Dham to witness the Leela of the Lord. So, and he stayed there until the time that King Bhagirath brought the Ganges down from the spiritual world. Why did he do so? Because King Bhagirath's ancestors had gone out to discover who had stolen the sacrificial horse from the arena of King Sagara. And as they searched everywhere, they found the horse near Kapila Muni's ashram. As he sat in meditation with his eyes half closed, and they concluded that here's the thief. It was Indra who stole the horse, which he's prone to do, but they concluded it was Kapila. So the 60,000 sons of King Sagara attacked Kapila Muni and were burned to ashes. And Kapila told their relatives that they could be redeemed, restored, revived, only by the water of the Ganges. So, King Bhagirath succeeded where his father and grandfather had failed in their attempts with great austerity and sincerity to bring the Ganges down to earth for the redemption of King Bhagirath's ancestors. So he performed tapasya for such a long time to achieve the favor of Ganga Devi. She appeared to him and expressed her two concerns. First being that the earth cannot sustain the force of my current as it descends from heavenly planets. Secondly, she expressed that I'm fearful that on this earth planet, so many sinful souls will take bath in my waters to have their sins washed off, and I will become overly polluted. So Bhagirat, the king, performed tapasya to please Lord Shiva until he attained his darshan and appealed to him to receive Madhaganshis in the locks of his hair, which would dissipate or flow so she could gracefully appear in the Himalayas. Bhagirat Maharaj informed Ganga Devi of this arrangement and assured her that you don't need to be concerned about pollution of sinful reactions because devotees will come and bathe in your waters, and those devotees who carry the Lord in their heart will counteract the sinful pollution of conditioned souls, and you need not fear. So in that condition, she agreed to descend, dissipating the impact of her descent in Lord Shiva's matted hair, appearing at Gangotri, flowing down from the Himalayas through Hardwar and Prayag. And Bhagirat Maharaj was leading her all the way, riding on his chariot, blowing a conch shell. And when King Bhagirat reached Navadvip Dham, at a certain point he could not hear the roar of the Ganga behind him. So he turned back and she was standing still. Huge wall of water standing perfectly still. And he was afraid that he commit some offense. So he prayed to her. And she told him that I have descended to fulfill your desire. I also have a desire, which I beg you to allow me to be fulfilled. It's the month of Magh. Gaur Purnima is approaching. This is long before the appearance of Lord Gauranga. But understanding that Navadvipa is his eternal residence, she said, I want to wait here until the birthday of my Lord to celebrate Gaur Purnima before I continue with you. So they waited until Gaur Purnima, and after the festival, Ganga Devi very joyfully resumed her flow until she came to Janadvip, where she stopped again. And Bhagirat Maharaj, he saw Janamuni in Samadhi and offered his obeisances to him. And seeing Janamuni, Ganga Devi became so excited. She lost control of herself and she flooded into a current that washed away part of the Samadhi of Janamuni, which at first made him a little angry until he caught the fragrance of Ganga Devi and felt the cooling spray of her waves upon his face, and he understood this is not an ordinary river. He bowed down to offer his obeisances, and he took some achman from the Ganges for purification, and in so doing he drank the entire river. At which point, Bhagirat Maharaj served Janamuni sufficiently to win his favor and explained his dilemma that his forefathers could only be delivered by the water of Ganga. So then Janamuni released Ganga. That's why she's named Janava, daughter of Janamuni. And she flowed down and delivered by her touch upon the ashes of the forefathers of Bhagirat Maharaj, those souls were all delivered. this little deviation was to give a little background to Bhishma Dev, who was born from the womb of Ganga Devi with Maharaj Shantanu as his father. And then Bhishma, as a child, went to Gurukul with Brihaspati in the heavenly planets. After which, Ganga Devi, his mother, entrusted him to Mother Earth, where he came to Janamuni's ashram for darshan and built a hut just next to Janamuni, where Bhishma Dev heard every day Srimad Bhagavatam, and in the Bhagavatam he heard and realized the inner secret of all the Vedas, which is Gaura Tattva. And that's why when Kaviraj Goswami gives scriptural references to affirm that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, he cites Bhishma Dev, who's quoting Janamuni. That Lord Gauranga, in his youth, has a golden complexion, like molten gold. And then later in life, he takes sannyas. And even though that caused so much anguish on one level, he is still considered the highest abode of peace because he silences the impersonalists and non-devotees. That verse is from Mahabharata. Echoed in Chaitanya Charitamrita to confirm that Lord Gauranga is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Bhishma Dev became so enlightened in his association and studies from Janamuni, especially in understanding the esoteric secret of Vedanta, which is Gaura Tattva, that Maharaj Yudhisthira approached him for enlightenment, to relieve him from that deep anguish of the cost of lives at Kurukshetra. Maharaj Yudhisthira asked so many questions, which Bhishma answered so perfectly. And when Maharaj Yudhisthira asked Bhishma, what kind of man is most dear to all and endowed with the highest virtue? Bhishma answered, I heard that in Krishna's narration to King Ugrasena, describing that it is Narada who loves all so dearly and who never rejoices at the misfortune of anyone, who is able to see within the hearts of all beings and yet never discloses their secrets. And as a symptom of his love for Krishna, his kindness to all is the highest virtue man can achieve, as revealed in the story of Jajali, which Bhishma Dev told as the example of the highest virtue and most perfect religious principle. Jajali was a sage, an ascetic, who became so powerful by his austerities that he would fast for long periods of time while standing in the river during which time a pair of Kalinga birds made a nest in his long matted hair. And being so dedicated to ahimsa, he didn't move while they made their nest, while they laid their eggs, and they raised the little baby birds. And the birds one day left the nest and came right back. And they left the nest, came back later. Then they left the nest for a day, and came back after a day. Then 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, 2 weeks. At which point it became clear that they weren't coming back. And the parents had also abandoned the nest. At which point, Jajali came out of the water very proud of his tapasya and ahimsa and thinking he had no equal anywhere in the world. And he praised himself for his incomparable virtue until he heard a voice from the sky proclaiming that, Jajali, your virtue cannot even compare to that of the merchant Tuladar in Varanasi. And yet, even he, who is so more exalted than you, does not have any of the kind of pride which has infected your heart. He became angry, and he headed right away for Varanasi. And he was very surprised as he walked down the street. A merchant stood up and approached him and said, Jajali, I've been waiting for you. So eager to meet you. And how did you know it was me? And he asked him, how, Tuladar, have you attained such wisdom? And they began to converse. In the course of that conversation, Jajali asked Tuladar, what is the highest virtue? To which he answered, friendliness, kindness, ahimsa, compassion. Which naturally dissipates any kind of envy from the heart. And he said, since I see the world from this higher perspective, I consider animal sacrifices, even as prescribed in the Vedas, to be an inferior religious principle. Whereas compassion, renunciation, kindness, and ahimsa are superior religious principles. And therefore, even farming is abominable. Because so many insects are injured or killed in the process of tilling the land. At this point, Jajali was completely bewildered, because we all know agriculture to be, as Srila Prabhupada said, the noble profession. So he asked Tuladar, if mankind became so compassionate that they wouldn't even till the land out of fear of harming other beings, how would man subsist on this planet? To which Tuladar replied that if the world population became so compassionate, kind, and nonviolent that they would not be willing to hurt physically or emotionally any other living being, then the earth would be so overjoyed that she would produce all of mankind's needs spontaneously. And the devas and rishis in the higher planets would provide celestial gifts to complement her earthly bounty. And said, look. And Jajali looked to the sky. Look, those little birds that you sheltered in your hair have come to see you. because they understood that you have now at last become a worthy father to them. So greet them as your children and welcome them. So Bhishma Dev, the son of Ganga Devi, shortly thereafter concluded his teachings. That great warrior who had led so many men in so many battles and taught so many subjects to so many students, gave up his life at will and returned to the spiritual abode. A question has persisted for some time. Who is superior, Ganga Devi or Mother Jamuna, the river? And that debate went on in the court of King Akbar. And all the kings and sages and devotees who lived on the shore of Ganges said Ganga Devi is superior to Jamuna. Whereas those who lived near Jamuna said that Jamuna is superior over Ganga Devi. And King Akbar wanted a definitive conclusion to the debate, so he sent for Jiva Goswami, who in Vrindavan was following the vow of Chaitra Sannyas, which means you can leave the Dham for a day, but you have to come back at night. So he was reluctant to go to Akbar's court, thinking that it might break his vow if he didn't get back on time. So he declined. And King Akbar wrote back to him and said, but just consider, this discussion will be of so many benefit to so many souls over such a long period of time that please reconsider. So he did. And then he left early in the morning, and he entered the court of King Akbar, where the debate was continuing. Who is superior, Ganga Devi or Jamuna? And there's so many arguments on either side. Ganga Devi originates from the melted form of Prema Manjari in Goloka Vrindavan. And then she reappears as Viraja, who is consorting with Krishna when Radha learned of it and came searching to catch them together. And out of fear, Viraja turned herself into a river who embraced the 9 islands. Later, she transformed herself, and Krishna hid because he was afraid. Radha is angry. So Radha understood what was happening. So she dressed in her most enchanting sari and played this most alluring raga on her lute, which drew Krishna out of hiding. And he surrendered to her and said that, your love is supreme. No one can compare. How can I please you? And she said, for our pleasure pastimes, create a pleasure paradise of unprecedented beauty and fill it with new sakis and manjaris and birds and deer and other animals. Seeing that Ganga Devi had already surrounded that region like a moat, embracing the Dham, Krishna told Radha that here you and I will remain united in one form forever. And the devotees who understand this will worship this place as Nava Vrindavan. It's Navadvip, also called Nava Vrindavan. So, from one perspective, who could be equal or superior to Ganga Devi? From another perspective, Jamuna is also called Kalindi, Krishna's queen in Dwarka, who is Vishaka of Braja, non-different from Jamuna. So, Srimad Bhagavatam concludes the chapter of Bhagirath Maharaj bringing down Ganges that Mother Ganges bestows liberation, whereas Jamuna Devi bestows love of Krishna, a much higher achievement. But that all changes with the appearance of Lord Gauranga, who, because, Ganga Devi was a little bit jealous of Jamuna, and she performed tapasya for a long time, that she could attain an equal fortune of having Krishna bathed in her waters. So Lord Gauranga bathed in the Ganges and Navadvip Dham, at Prayag, when Jamuna and Ganga merge and flow down to Navadvip, east side of the river is Ganga, west side is Jamuna. So really, Lord Gauranga, even in his childhood, performed pastimes in both Ganges and Jamuna. And therefore, the results of bathing in the Ganges are achieved by mere remembrance of Jamuna, who bestows Krishna Prem higher than the liberation granted by Ganga Devi, and yet, by Lord Gauranga's touch, the Ganges awards Gaur Prem. And in the Brahma Vivarta Purana, there's a very interesting statement. It seems contradictory. It's a conversation between Lord Krishna and Ganga Devi, which we have narrated many times. But there will be something additional this time. The conversation is toward the end of, actually it's already the beginning of what would be Kali Yuga. Because Krishna's Leela extended 25 years past the end of Dwapara Yuga to the beginning of Kali Yuga. And the symptoms of Kali Yuga were beginning to manifest even in Dwarka. So the Jadus asked Krishna, what does this mean? He said, this is the effect of the offense that Samba committed to the sages, that these anomalies are appearing in Dwarka. People are becoming angry and criticizing and gossiping. And the atonement would be to go to Prabhakshetra and perform sacrifice. And the Jadus were very eager. But Uddhava understand that's not right. Because if the symptoms of Kali Yuga are appearing in Dwarka, even during Krishna's presence, that's not going to be counteracted by a sacrifice in Prabhakshetra. So he approached Krishna in confidence and said, what is it? Actually, he knew what it was. You're about to leave this planet. So Uddhava begged Krishna, don't let me witness that final chapter, and especially don't leave me here after you after you conclude your Boma Lila. And Krishna told Uddhava that no, you are going to stay behind. Because there's a very essential pastime, mission that I was not able to perform during my time here on earth. And that is to deliver the message of the glories of Braj Bhakti to the deities and sages of Badrika Ashram. You have become sufficiently familiar with the ways of Braj by the many times that you went there to deliver messages, and you even took me there from Mathura and later from Dwarka. You know the ways of the Brijabasis. Convey that message to the deities and sages of Badrika Ashram, and from there to all the world. So with a mission to keep his life intact, Uddhava stayed behind, although the separation was unbearable for him. But he was fixed on his mission. Next, Gangadevi approached Krishna and said basically the same thing. I can perceive by these anomalies that you're about to depart this planet, which means that I will become overly polluted by the sinful souls who adhere to this one principle of Vedic culture, that after, in the Kali Yuga, when people give up every practice of Vedic culture, they cling to one, which is to go to a distant body of water and take bath in a holy place. Which means all these sinful souls will come take bath in my waters, which will make them overly polluted. So she begged Krishna that he grant his blessings that she could flow underground, as Saraswati had already done, and re-emerge at the dawn of Satyuga. Rational appeal. And Krishna said to her, just like he said to Uddhava, no. You have a mission here in this world. Because, and the timing is very telling. He said, in 5,000 years, which would not be the time of Lord Chaitanya, it would be the time of Srila Prabhupada's birth. In 5,000 years, I will send my mantra upasaka, one who worships me in the sound of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. He will gather up Vaishnavas from all around the world, bring them to Navadvip to bathe in your waters, and that will counteract all the pollution deposited by these sinful souls. And then Krishna went on to say that that appearance of my mantra upasaka, who we understand is clearly Srila Prabhupada, will inaugurate the beginning of the golden age to last for 10,000 years. And then Krishna gave the symptoms of that golden age, and see if you recognize where in Srila Prabhupada's books you've heard this. There will be Ekavarna, one designation, one scripture, Bhagavad Gita, one mantra, Hare Krishna. Where does Srila Prabhupada say those exact words in his own books?
Introduction.
Right. Which again is contradictory, apparently. Because Srila Prabhupada emphasized Varnashram Dharma. But in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, he's saying, let there be Ekavarna, one Varna, meaning Vaishnava. And then within that context, you can have the subordinate psychophysical Varnas. So then, he told Gangadevi, stay for the duration of that golden age, after which you can go underground until Satyuga dawns. Which means that we have only 10,000 years left to complete our business here. Because after that, Govardhan just merges with the horizon. He ceases to be a hill. just flat plain. Can't even tell where he was. Ganga Devi becomes dry. She's flowing underground. And Kali assaults the souls of this world with full force, quarrel, and hypocrisy. So, to urge us in finishing our purpose here before that dreadful time arrives, Srila Prabhupada told us that Vaishnavas, it's even more true for Gaudiyas. Vedic culture is patriarchal. Vaishnava culture is balanced. Gaudiya culture is matriarchal. So he said devotees should be like a blend of a British soldier and a Bengali mother. Meaning the loyalty, discipline, commitment of an enlisted man with the love, kindness, and compassion that we honor today in this Gaudiya holy day called Mother's Day. Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? Where's the microphone?
Mars, we know from the scriptures there are at least 7 mothers that we honor in the Vedic conception. Mother Earth as being a very prominent mother in our lives.
I swore I wouldn't talk about Mother Earth today, since I was informed that could be a controversial subject. But since you brought it up,
yes,
it's controversial.
I was hoping to hear some of the glories of Mother Earth and how her greatest quality of tolerance is being tested to the limits.
Do I have to repeat that?
No.
Oh, you got it rigged. Good, thank you. It's very wonderful to see that during this coronavirus, Mother Earth is experiencing such relief to the extent that the Himalayas are reappearing or appearing to some people who never even saw them before. Now the Himalayas are the emblem of Krishna's majesty, which were invisible behind the smog until the coronavirus dispelled the fog, the smog, that people could see the Himalayas, or they can see the Rockies in this country. Some for the first time. The waters of Venice clearing up so the dolphins are returning. Mother Earth is experiencing a reprieve during the lockdown of mankind's madness. It's like Krishna hit the pause button and he's waiting to see what we will do for reset. She is the most tolerant emblem of forbearance, the earth, which is a symptom of her love for Krishna, because she is the consort of Krishna in his form of Viraha. Mother Earth is, it's there, right, in the prayers of Uddhava. When he delivers Krishna's message to Braj as an introduction, he's glorifying Srimati Radharani as being the source of every consort who accompanies Krishna in every avatar in which he appears in this world. And going through the long list, when you're Ram, she's Kausalya, Sita, when she is Devahuti. No, that's not right. Devahuti is his mother. Kapila. She is the mystic perfections. And she is, when he is any form he comes in, she is his consort. And when he is Viraha, you are Bhumi. So not only is she the consort of Krishna in his form as Viraha, they had a child. Why they need him? What was his name?
Boma.
Who started out as a very good boy, but then by bad association, he became later known as Bomashura. And everybody did their best to rectify him, including Krishna. But there again, the one thing Krishna will not do is interfere with the free will of the jiva. Even if it means that he has to tolerate what he hates to receive what he loves in the long run. But he can only tolerate so much. Because Boma, and you hear it in the words of Lord Gauranga, who says, even if a Malecha is my devotee, I will protect him. Even if my son becomes inimical to devotees, I will annihilate him. It's not mere rhetoric. Krishna actually did it. He just became so fed up with Boma that he ascended the back of Garuda to fly into battle, and who insisted on coming along with him? Who's the most adventurous of Krishna's queens? Satyabhama. She said, take me along. She was always eager for some adventure. So Krishna, with Satyabhama flying on Garuda, attacked the fortress of Boma, which was fortified with all kinds of technological weaponry and defenses. And the battle became fierce. And even Satyabhama, who loves a good adventure, she reached her limit. She shouted to Krishna, just kill him now. He did. What is the significance of that? Bhumi appealed to Krishna that he vowed to her he would never kill her son without her permission. Satyabhama is no different from Bhumi. And when she not only gave her consent, it's like a demand, kill him now. That was as good as the consent of Bhumi. Krishna killed Bomashura. And then Bhumi emerges from the fortifications with Krishna's grandson, Bhagadatta. And she told Krishna, look, he's so traumatized just seeing his father killed. Please promise him safety. And Krishna said, he has nothing to fear from me. What happened to him? He perished in the battle of Kurukshetra. So Krishna's holding the pause button. He slowed down the madness. And in this time, we can see that even though mankind creates so much toxic waste, so much intoxication in his plundering of the earth, You know, what's the roots of humility? Hummus. What is the foremost virtue of a leader? Humility, along with integrity, accountability, transparency. Humility is the crest jewel of all virtues. If a leader demonstrates solidarity with all soils and all souls, then the reset button could be beneficial to all the inhabitants of the planet. I don't know if we have such leaders. Let's be on the lookout. But it's a wonderful demonstration that even though mankind creates so much toxic waste every second of his life in violating the principles of living on Earth, still, Mother Earth can process that pollution up to the extent as is being created during the pause arranged by the Karuna. Virus? Blessing. The Karuna blessing. It's a wonderful demonstration that even though mankind is still processing so much toxic waste, which becomes intoxication to all of us, intoxicating the air, the water, the ether, the soil. Mother Earth can process up to the extent that is being produced during the Karuna blessing. The real test comes with what will happen from this Karuna episode. And I was warned, don't talk anything practical, because there are spies seeing if the Earthling Coalition is making any strategy to get back to Earth. But since Nitya Prabhu asked a question, we'll take the liberty to mention practical possibilities of reconsidering Srila Prabhupada's primary mandates for this community. Gracefully integrated with all other activities being offered here. Precious opportunity. Let us pray and not go in waste. Let it not be wasted.
There's a beautiful description of the personality of the earth here in the Nectar of Devotion, describing the ecstatic symptom of standing of the hairs on the body. The standing up of hair on the body resulting from jubilation is described in the 10th canto, 13th chapter, verse 10 of Srimad Bhagavatam, in connection with the gopis engaged in the rasa dance. During this rasa dance, Krishna disappeared all of a sudden with Radharani, and the gopis began to search him out. At that time they addressed the earth and said, "Dear earthly planet, how many austerities and penances you must have undergone to have the lotus feet of Krishna always touching your surface. I think you must be very jubilant because the trees and plants, which are just like hairs on your body, are standing up so gloriously. May we ask when you first got those symptoms? Have you been enjoying this jubilation since you were touched by the incarnation Vamana? Or since you were delivered by the incarnation Varaha?"
What's the answer? The gopis are speaking in semi-madness, and yet their analysis is very accurate. The answer is when Lord Varaha rescued her from beneath the water and raised her on his snout. And he was moving across the waters of the Garbhadak Ocean fast. And she asked him, "Where are you taking me?" He said, "I'm taking you to a place where there's trees." She was perplexed. Trees? Trees are on me. Where else are there going to be trees here in the middle of the ocean? She said, "Just wait and watch." And she saw, there's trees. Where are we? Where were they? This is Vrindavan. So does Vrindavan glorify the earth? Or does the earth glorify Vrindavan? It's both ways. So he set her down in Vrindavan.
So down where?
Vrindavan.
Vrindavan.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
As the Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, in all the planets of the universe, there's no place so fortunate as Earth, because on the earth it's the town of Vrindavan. And in Vrindavan there's no one so glorious as the gopis, because in their midst is my Srimati Radharani. So, on this special occasion of Mother's Day, when everyone should, who has a mother still living, should make a phone call, send a note.
It's like going to Chloe's mom.
Good instruction, thank you. It's really important. And then you see the magic that Mataji is so easily pleased.
Yes.
Okay, we're not allowed to talk about self-sufficiency in a practical way. You can talk about it in a theoretical way. What does that mean? Krishna is the only one who's self-sufficient. Because other than Krishna, everyone has to be filled with his mother's love until it reaches the point where they can bond more with their father. And unless a child is filled with his mother's love, he will not be able to properly express love to others and will be condemned to a life of frustration.
Wow.
And those years of investing so much devotion into raising a child, too much goes unnoticed and unacknowledged, especially during the night when the father's asleep, not observing what the mother goes through. So when you see a healthy, balanced individual, you know that there's a lot of years investment by a mother's love to fill them with affection to the point that they can extend gratitude and love to others. That's why Krishna is called self-sufficient, because he's filled with love to begin with. But there again, that's Paramama. Bhagavan, he's completely dependent on Mother Jashoda's love. Damodarati Ardhanasheshi Lalita Sak Kunramita Nishake Damodarati Srimati Radharani. Krishna's Atmaraman up to come. He's self-satisfied, not in need of anyone, until he sees Srimati Radharani. Then all of a sudden he's filled with desires, which only she can satisfy. So even though self-sufficiency applies to Krishna alone, that's Paramama. The Paramama feature of Krishna. The Bhagavan feature is so dependent on Mother Jashoda's love, with some assistance from Putana and the cows. Krishna, Krishna.
Any other questions from our exalted guests? Loka Varnatam.
You told me I couldn't speak.
I take it back.
Oh, yeah, I can take it back. I took it very personally.
Kamal?
Yes, Radhadasi.
Yeah, so
Here.
The perfect mother who insists not only on feeding all the humans, but even the dogs and cats.
yeah, I didn't get that last point you were saying that without like a child like caring for her parents like a mother or something, they kind of make it back to the spiritual world.
That's why no, it's not they can't make it a spiritual world. They can't interact in a very healthy, giving way with others on a level of giving love because they never received enough that it's overflowing that they want to and have to extend it to others. They may discipline themselves to do so, but it won't be a natural outgrowth of a healthy childhood. That's why Mother's Day is actually very important. I wouldn't say Vedic because Vedic is patriarchal. I wouldn't even say Vaishnava because it's balanced. Gaudiya is very matriarchal. And the Gaudiyas acknowledge the sanctity of motherhood.
Could that be analogous to the Mother Earth giving her love to the human society in terms of her giving her produce and her natural elements, all of the elements of the earth, and then if they're utilized in the loving exchange with the Lord, it increases, and kind of what you were talking about, how if they're used in demoniac ways, it decreases or blocks at least the opulence of the mother, the love of the mother.
As in the case of Pritha Maharaj, who became so angry at Bhumi, thinking that she was just, refusing to share her bounty. and then, she told him that it's not that I'm refusing. It's my gifts have been exploited by demons and used for horrific purposes. So I was refraining and bringing them forth, and it's been so long that the seeds have become infertile. So what to do? Bring me a calf. Every species of both human and non-human life, and celestials as well, can bring me a suitable calf and a suitable pot and milk me for all the necessities of every species of life. And they did. But it wasn't just physical sustenance, it was emotional and spiritual as well. Because the ultimate gift that the earth has to offer is Braj Bhakti, which cannot be found on any other planet. No other planet is blessed with the lotus footprints of Krishna. Well, you can see he performed pastimes in the heavenly planets, but he wore sandals. It's only on earth that he goes barefoot. And even when Mother Yashoda insisted, you have to wear shoes. And what did he say? As a Gopa, I'm obliged to go barefoot. But if you make shoes for all the cows, 4 for each, 900,000, and then another 1,100,000 in King Vrishabhana's herd, so it comes to 2 million cows, which means 4 million shoes. And each one has to have an umbrella also. If you provide shoes and umbrellas for all the cows. I'll wear shoes too. My mother just showed her, she just couldn't deal with it. She just tolerated him going barefoot. But what is the blessing and the ecstasy upon the earth to be touched and blessed with his lotus footprints upon her heart, which she again returns to us in the form of Braj Bhakti. We've not found that any other planet in the universe. Therefore, don't go to Vaikuntha. Because there's no access to Braja from Vaikuntha. If you fall down to Vaikuntha, then you have to come back to Earth.
So what is the difference between, or should we say, how do we view those who are environmentalists and who are understanding ecology, and are even working hard to try to deal with the abuses of human society towards soil, towards air, towards water, but they have no sense of to whom these things belong. They kind of have a humanistic view of the bhumi, of the planet, Earth, the mother, and how does a Vaishnava understand that, or should I say, how does a Vaishnava become allies with, but not become influenced by a humanistic perspective of the earth versus a
Devotional.
devotional aspect? That's the question.
First thing is don't make ecology into a religion of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Especially here in New Vrindavan, because that'll just create more resistance to the cause.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, anyone who has these, worthy sentiments towards the earth should be appreciated. Those are fine sentiments. But the reality is, it's treating the symptoms. The real pollution is in the heart. And from the heart, the ether is polluted. When the ether is polluted, creation manifesting from subtle to gross, pollution of heart creates pollution of ether, especially in the form of lies, especially when uttered by high court magistrates and preachers. When they utter lies, it causes such a disturbance in the ether that it pollutes the air, pollutes the water, pollutes the soil, pollutes ourselves, because we ingest that water, the products of the soil, and we're in the midst of that polluted ether, which makes it difficult to practice Krishna consciousness. So we should appreciate the sentiments of such souls. First of all, don't let ecology become a religion of itself. But if anyone has a sincere interest in the plight of the earth, then we can educate them that any solution to be effective has to address the pollution in the heart. And when that is purified, there will be a natural yearning to live in harmony with the earth and all the subjects of the earth. And that's why we perform Nam Sankirtan. It purifies the ether and touches the heart. And if that is accompanied by preaching, education, and an example, like Srila Prabhupada wanted here.
So on the one hand, we have incomplete environmentalists who have a humanistic a view of the earth belongs to man, or there should be keeping this thing together because this is our planet and everything. And then we also have on the other side, we have incomplete spiritualists who neglect the earth, thinking that it's not so important because really this is just a temporary planet. This is not our home. It's a temporary place. Let us go back home, back to God, and to hell with everything.
The planet is temporary, Bhumi is eternal. And even though she changes bodies, she's the same personality, eternally. You know, in Chaitanya Bhagavat, there's a very controversial chapter. So controversial that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, as the chapter progresses, it reaches a point toward the end where he writes a purport for almost every verse. And that's the chapter where Lord Gauranga is dancing in the mood of his different consorts. He's Rukmini, he's Srimati Radharani, he's Bhumi. And he assumes a female form to feed all the devotees. And it's, it's a little esoteric and it's potentially bewildering. Therefore, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, at a certain point in the chapter, is writing a purport for every verse. And what he keeps repeating in his purports is what Lord Gauranga is teaching us here, is that his energies should not be neglected or considered to be inferior. They have a spiritual face which will take us to Krishna if we acknowledge and serve that feature. So yeah, Bhumi has a temporary body which she'll change in time, but she's an eternal consort of the Lord. And even when she gives up her body in one place, she continues it elsewhere, awarding us the gift of Braj Bhakti, which is not available on any other planet. How could we neglect or abuse such a divine energy of the Lord and expect to please the Lord and develop love for Him? It's very wonderful how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati repeatedly says the same thing through that one chapter. Don't consider the energies of the Lord to be inferior. Even if they are inferior energies, they have a divine feature which will take us to Krishna if we acknowledge it. And in that chapter, the Lord is revealing his mood as Bhumi to articulate this very point.
There are verses in the scriptures that explain how, maybe using an example, no, actually the glorification of the holy Ganges, or maybe even Jamuna, or that it's considered to be offensive if we could see that if the water is polluted, that something is wrong with the water. So those verses like that tend to create a misconception or an apathetic approach to the ecology of the river. When you see stool and garbage floating in it, don't worry, it's still a transcendental river. And hasn't that led to callousness towards the the material sanctity of the river, or at least the cleanliness?
You can extend that same analogy into the Dham. Srila Prabhupada says that in response to people coming to Vrindavan being shocked, the filth, and Srila Prabhupada said, that's an external covering that she expands so that those who are attracted to enjoy and exploit will be more attracted to New York. Nevertheless, it's never been the mood of our acharyas to just neglect the Dham, even her superficial coverings. And it has been the mission of our acharyas, especially the 6 Goswamis. Going back, Vajranath, Krishna's own great-grandson, who became the king of Mathura, was visited, Maharaj Prisha came down to visit Vajra, and together they summoned Shandilya Muni, Nanda Maharaj's guru, who was one of the few humans still residing in Braj, because it had become practically uninhabited. So they summoned him and asked Shandilya Muni, what is the prime mandate for rulers? Meaning themselves, mainly. And he said, it is to renovate the beauty and glory of Braj so that even ordinary souls can see through the covering something attractive, something appealing, something dignified. He said that's the prime, he's talking about rulers in the rulers who have some reign over Vrindavan. And, when Maharaj Prisha came down from Hastinapur and he asked Vajra in Mathura, how is everything in your kingdom? He said, in Mathura, everything is fine. I have no concerns here. My concern is for the outlying Braj, which is appearing to be like a wasteland. And he found that intolerable. So they summoned Shandilya Muni. And after their formal exchanges of love, they asked him the question, what is the prime mandate for rulers, meaning the king of Mathura and the emperor of the world? And he said, it is to restore the lost dignity of Braj on a visual level. So that even ordinary people can see something special, something beautiful here. Meaning that it is not acceptable just to leave the Dham in an unsightly condition. Even if you are dealing with the covering, it's still the covering of the Dham. It still has a sacred dimension to it. And he's saying this as the duty to the leaders for the welfare of mankind. That they can feel some attraction to the Dham, rather than just being, turned away by the filth and unsightliness. To give them a chance to see that there's something more, and to become attracted to the actual Dham residing beneath those superficial layers. Yeah, it's superficial, it's a material covering over the Dham. It's really the covering over our own hearts that sees that. And Shandilya Muni was emphatic with Maharaj Parikshit and Vajra, it is your foremost duty to address that. So then, they were enlivened beyond words. So they, so grateful to Sandilya Muni, who returned to Govardhan. Maharaj Parikshit went back to Hastinapur and sent down craftsmen, artists, sculptors, engineers, architects, masonry workers, and put them all at the disposal of Vajra, under the guidance of Sandilya Muni, who revealed where everything was during Krishna's pastimes, how it looked, and how it could be recreated in such a way as to fulfill the mission of the leaders in helping their subjects develop love for Krishna.
Great answer.
So who are you saying in Delhi did that? You said Yudhisthira?
Maharaj Parikshit came down from Hastinapur to visit Vajra in Mathura. And they didn't know how to proceed, so they called Sandilya Muni from Govardhan to come and guide them, which he did, which was the first restoration of Vrindavan. Then it fell into disarray again. And the next major revival was the Six Goswamis. After that it was Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur.
Any other questions?